Ladies and gentlemen, this is huge. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. New York Post, Daily Beast. There are other publications that are covering this. Ex-Trump special counsel Jack Smith referred to DOJ. Trump lines up next target as Bolton could face life in prison. And he's being referred for a criminal investigation to the Department of Justice. Hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. You have Grassley demands telecommunications companies, federal entities turn over all records provided to Jack Smith. And this is huge. Hit subscribe. This is the beginning of a criminal investigation where the fourth indictment and arrest could be, will almost certainly be an indictment of Jack Smith. So there were crimes, and there were whistleblowers already working with Chuck Grassley. There were crimes committed before. There were definitely crimes committed before Jack Smith. Almost certainly crimes committed after Jack Smith became special counsel. Hit subscribe to this channel, to my super chat. Thank you. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel after this. That's below, also in the description. My super chat. Can't do this without you. Let's get started.
And to that other breaking story from the Judiciary Committee yesterday, the accusations that the FBI spied on sitting Republican senators as part of the January 6th investigation. What do we know? Well, we turn to Mark Meredith. He is live from the White House with more. Hi, Mark. Good morning.
Dana, I sure am. Good morning to you. Today, Republican senators are outraged, if not downright furious with the FBI after they learned that some of their calls were also probed as part of the investigation into January 6th, where senators were basically finding out where these people were calling and where they were calling from. These reports are just coming out yesterday, and we're learning who was targeted in the probe, and they include Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Josh Hawley of Missouri, Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, and Representative Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania. A document recently uncovered by the Trump administration and first reported by Fox Digital shows the FBI pulled the phone records of those lawmakers a few years after the January 6th attack. As Politico points out, the probe did not obtain the content of the calls, only the recipients, the lengths of the calls, and the date on which they were placed. The request for this information was approved by a grand jury. This was all tied to the FBI and special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into the alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. President Trump was charged but not convicted in the case. The case's code name was Arctic Frost. Lawmakers, as Aisha mentioned, will have a lot of questions about this, about why this was allowed to happen, and are also considering next steps to hold the FBI.
So he got a grand jury to allow him to spy. The issue, though, is that what was the point? None of these lawmakers committed any crimes. So you can't simply spy on a rival political party because you think they might be up to something. There has to be some kind of criminal conduct. And there was no criminal conduct. It was just a wide-ranging. This is from the wonderful, morally superior side that calls everyone a despot and authoritarian.
Accountable.
I don't know how Grassley wants to handle it. I'm not going to get ahead of government administration. But I tell you, this is a serious situation. We're going to have to get to the bottom.
This credit card has
We've yet to hear from the former special counsel about all of this. We'll be curious if he gives any comment at any point. But we are hearing from President Trump today. Dana, he says it looks like Jack Smith had his hand in the cookie jar. Dana.
All right, Mark, thank you so much.
Let's bring in our colleague, Will Cain, host of the Will Cain Show, 4 o'clock Eastern every day out of Texas. And Will, good morning to you. So Josh Hawley is one of the senators on this list. We're going to talk to him next hour. But here is Ron Johnson's characterization of what was happening there. Watch here.
It should shock, it should outrage every American. Quite honestly, by now, it should be obvious to every American that it's not the Republicans that are a threat to our democracy. It's President Obama, it's President Biden, it's the radical leftists that have served and support them. This is outrageous.
In the end, the president winning re-election forced the case just to be dropped. And it was left there after his victory.
And that's how you know likely criminal conduct took place, because there was no crime that any of these senators committed. So nobody has accused any of these senators of committing a crime, yet they were spied on. And so imagine if Trump had done that. So Biden's administration did that to Republicans. Imagine if Trump had done that to Democrats. It would be the end of the world.
What do you think of it, Will? What do you think it goes?
Bill, I think if they did this to a Republican senator, a dozen Republican senators, imagine what they did to the average American. That's not simply a talking point. Think about this. No matter how you feel about any one of these individual Republican senators, this represents roughly 20% of the Republican Senate. These are elected officials. This is votes by people in their state to send a representative to the United States Senate, and they are placed under investigation. And I think that's an attack not just on the Republican Party, but an attack on the American people. You know, we've learned the power of projection, Bill and Dana, and I think we've learned it very profoundly over the past decade, that when you accuse someone else of a certain sin, it is almost biblical that you are the one committing that sin. And for over a decade now, we've heard warnings of authoritarianism, of tyranny. And if this doesn't fit the definition, I don't know what does. Taking your political opposition, taking half of America, because I do believe this is an attack on Americans, and placing them under investigation is the definition of an authoritarian government.
Last week or a week and a half ago, James Comey was indicted by a grand jury. This apparently was also approved by a grand jury. Do you think that the Justice Department will release the underlying documents that explain why it even went to the grand jury?
Here's the difference, though. If Jack Smith got a grand jury to spy on 8 innocent Republican senators who were never accused of a specific crime, that's different from Comey committing perjury like a million times, or Brennan committing perjury even more. Perjury is a specific crime that he is accused of having committed because he lied about a leak. And also, they were able to obtain FISA warrants by lying to judges. So they were able to spy on a number of people all throughout Russiagate and this Spygate through the court system. They were able to obtain the paperwork needed to do a lot of despicable things. The issue, however, is even if Jack Smith was able to obtain the ability to surveil Republican senators, that doesn't mean it wasn't criminal in nature. That doesn't mean that he didn't commit a crime in spying on innocent people. If they were able to manipulate bureaucracy in the manner, for example, that one of the FBI lawyers was charged and convicted by John Durham of lying on a FISA application to deceive a judge. So that, I mean, just because they get the paperwork needed to spy doesn't mean that they didn't commit crimes. It's very different from a specific crime leveled at Comey or Letitia James or Bolton.
In the first place.
Wouldn't it be fascinating to know? Yes, I hope so, Dana. Why would a dozen Republican senators be under investigation? Why would you be monitoring their calls, the length of their calls, who they were placing those calls to? What did they have to do with January 6th? Did these Republican senators show me the documentation? Did they, in your investigation, somehow organize, perpetuate, instigate, stoke what they called a threat to democracy, what ended up being a riot?
So 8 U.S. senators, 1 congressman, all Republicans. What do we not know about Arctic frost that you hope to still discover?
Well, first of all, as it relates to the seizing of our phone records, who knew about it? Who approved it? Normally there'd be a very rigorous approval process going pretty high up in the chain, but they circumvented that by saying, well, these aren't subjects of our investigation, they're not targets. So they circumvented that. So this is an outrageous violation of the separation of powers. We need to know who knew what and when they knew it.
Well, there was one agent that gets named in a lot of these documents who was involved. It's like one person.
Timmy Tebow. Yeah, he was the agent in charge that basically thought of this investigation, then approved it. Totally violating FBI procedures in terms of how you establish an investigation, get it approved up the chain. He did it himself. So he's one of the bad actors. But, Laura, there are plenty of people still in the Jack Smith prosecution team that are still burrowed into the FBI. This only came to light because the agent who seized the records, who got them, basically used this to recertify in this CAS team. mean, basically, it's a brag sheet. This was an accomplishment to recertify to be able to do the exact same thing again. So, happenstance, we had a whistleblower. By the way, we need more whistleblowers. We need more whistleblowers. That's how we found out about the associations they were targeted, including Senator Schmitt's Association of Attorneys General targeted by this FBI. So, again, this is out of control. The Biden administration, the Obama administration have weaponized government 10 times what Democrats are falsely accusing the Trump administration of doing.
Senator Schmitt, what legal recourse, if any, do these targets have? I mean, to have your phone records sought after by a federal official or federal agency without cause on this bogus rationale of it's only a preliminary analysis, that's a new one on me. I hadn't heard that one before.
Well, I think this is still unfolding. There's still more to know, but it's certainly a violation of their civil rights. But also, Laura, I think the time has come for criminal prosecutions. I think some of the statute of limitations has expired on some of these things, but not on a conspiracy. And the fact is, if you're part of a conspiracy in mile marker 1, but you try to take an exit ramp at mile marker 5, you're still liable for the damage and the criminal activity at mile marker 10. We're at mile marker 10. And so whether it's Comey, Clapper, Brennan, whoever else we know or don't know right now is a part of this, I think indictments should be coming here. We can't tolerate this. And the Democrats try to act like President Trump's weaponizing. It's not what's happening.
This is about accountability.
It is.
So there's no statute of limitations for conspiracy. People conspired, even if the conspiracy was 10 years ago that it started, okay? If people conspired, worked with one another, used bureaucracy to set up and frame Trump, to accuse him of things he didn't do, to spy on innocent Americans, whether they're politicians in this case, that's a criminal act. And the statute of limitations only starts. There's the only statute of limitations begin when the conspiracy ends, and they're still furthering the behavior or the criminal conduct. So there's no statute of limitations pertaining to Russiagate or this.
And I would say this.
Someone has to be accountable
100%.
for this.
And also, we need to be clear of the distinction.
Ridiculous.
They weaponized it. The fact that we would go after people who weaponized it is not the same thing, because if we don't do that, it's going to happen again.
And Senator Johnson, I mean, what were they after? This is a question I kept asking myself for the last, since you brought this to light. What do they want here? Was it just a fishing expedition? Did they hope for one piece of information to then spin out another special counsel investigation? What did they want? I mean, going after the RGA, Republican Governors Association, Charlie Kirk, Turning Point, other conservative groups, sitting U.S. senators. I thought Senator Kennedy was going to have an aneurysm today. He was so upset, and he was funnier than usual, which is a hard thing to pull off when your colleagues are being targeted. But what do you think they were after?
One word answer: power. Democrats will do anything to acquire and maintain power. That's what this is all about. Yes, it's a fishing expedition. And Eric's the expert in terms of what crimes might be prosecuted. The damage that people like Comey, Brennan, Clapper, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Thibault, the damage they have done to our democracy, starting with the exoneration memo of Hillary Clinton through Crossfire Hurricane, the Russian hoax, up to this moment. Russia and China, they could only dream of interfering in our elections to that standpoint. I was targeted early with Senator Grassley with the unsolicited briefing in August of 2020 to run us off the tracks of the Hunter Biden investigation. Then they leaked that to the media, smearing me during my reelection campaign. So again, this is time and time again, orders of magnitude worse than anything they're falsely accusing Trump of doing.
Our country is on the line here, really. It's whether democracy is going to even matter or mean anything, correct? I mean, to me.
The left is a danger to our democracy.
Yeah, and
the Democrats set up and framed. There was literally not a shred of evidence that pointed to Trump working with Russia or colluding. There was zero evidence also, and the notion is completely absurd, that Russia would be afraid and frightened of Democrats. They invaded under Biden. Everything that could possibly have taken place that was bad for the countries that Democrats cared about, or the country in particular that was invaded under Biden, unfortunately took place. The Crimea was taken under President Obama. and a neighboring country was invaded also during Bush's administration. No major invasions during Trump. So how they spun it to where Russia was afraid of Hillary and worked to catapult Trump, I have no clue, but it was a Cold War Red Scare hysteria that they literally fabricated with the help of Brennan and Comey and others, and Clapper and a whole lot of other people who conspired. That's why the conspiracy statutes don't have statute of limitations. They're still furthering the conspiracy. That's according to John Ratcliffe and Ron Johnson and others. And within the DNC emails or Clinton's emails, the campaign emails that were released that The Guardian and everyone else published, the New York Times, within those emails, they wanted Trump to win. And then he won. And then, of course, they changed their tune.
I also think what this is really about is they never forgave President Trump for coming down the escalator in the first place, right? And so this was all an effort, whether you use Russiagate or then it's trying to sideline a presidency with impeachments, or it's the Hunter Biden laptop pre-bunking, or it's the censorship that started 3 days in the Biden administration, or Arctic frost, or the prosecutions that happened under Jack Smith, Fani Willis, Alvin Bragg. All of it was meant to sideline a movement that threatened permanent Washington and their grip on power. That's what this is all about. They know it, and there ought to be consequences.
Senator Johnson, Jeffrey Toobin over at CNN says, he's, as usual, covering for the Democrats, says there's nothing to see here. Watch.
It's not even news. Jack Smith cites these conversations in his report. So this is not like he was trying to keep this a secret. It is, of course, appropriate for him to investigate the time and nature, or at least the time and the duration of calls with members of Congress. It's a complete non-story, except that Jack Smith was doing his job.
Doing his job? Illegally spying on people? What? How is that in any way, shape, or form part of a criminal investigation? They weren't the subject. They had nothing to do with that terrible day in January. None of these senators did. They questioned how Biden could have won, which even George Clooney essentially in Hollywood questioned that when they 3 weeks of negative media coverage, one article from George Clooney, and Biden, who won his primary, was kicked to the curb politically, and then Harris was the nominee. So, I mean, if Democrats are going to force Biden out after he won the Democratic primary and allow and push his vice president to usurp him for the nomination in 24, why were these Republican senators illegally spied on? What was the point? They weren't under criminal investigation. What could they have if Jack Smith mentions these conversations in a report, or his report, he never explained within the report apparently that these senators were spied on. That's different than just mentioning certain conversations.
I've been investigating the FBI now for about 10 years. So truthfully, I don't find this surprising, as he doesn't find it surprising. It is shocking. It is outrageous.
Well, you guys subpoena Smith?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. No, I'm chairman of the Perm Subcommittee Investigation. We do a good job working with Chairman Grassley. We'll combine our forces again, and we're going to get to the bottom of this with people like Eric Schmidt.
I mean, Grassley is so impressive. I mean, he just keeps going 90 plus years. But he kind of equivocated today when he was pressed on whether or not there would be another investigation into this Arctic frost. If I heard it correctly, and I think
he wants to give the FBI time to get us the information, but there will be an investigation.
Okay.
Trust me.
He's done great work. And look, if you had wall-to-wall coverage on Watergate, okay, which this is like 100 times worse.
Was that a fair analogy? If that's breaking into political, this is like breaking into an entire political party.
Absolutely, in individuals and people who just happen to be of a political party, right? There has to be a reckoning for this. Otherwise, they will feel emboldened to do it all over again if they're ever in power again, which of course we can't.
It's like the criminals running in the streets in Chicago and Portland. If there's no consequences, they just keep running in the streets.
Correct.
Senator.
So it's always, it's no problem. It's just totally normal. None of it is normal. It's all criminal in nature, and there's almost certainly crimes committed.
Testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee with questions ranging from political violence to the James Comey indictment and possibly new revelations regarding former special counsel Jack Smith tracking the phone calls of nearly a dozen Republican senators. Joining me now is Florida Senator and Senate Judiciary Committee Ashley Moody, who will, of course, be in that hearing today. Senator, good morning. It's great to see you. So give us the cliff notes before this hearing even happens. What do you think the most important revelations will be to come out of this?
Good morning. And yeah, this is going to be an incredibly important hearing. So many of the issues that our cities are facing, our nation is facing, are being looked at by the Judiciary Committee. As you know, I'm one of the newest United States senators, and I'm the most junior member on the Judiciary Committee. I'm extraordinarily excited about this hearing today. We're going to hear from Pam Bondi as a former AG, understanding how we are shoring up and strengthening our nation's cities that have been ravaged by crime. That's certainly going to be a hot topic. And let's not forget, just last night, FBI revealed that under the last administration, they were surveilling 9 GOP senators' telephones, the calls that they were making, to whom they were speaking, where they were when they were making these phone calls. I think that shocked those of us on the Hill. We cannot believe that this has been uncovered. We are grateful for the FBI for digging in and giving us these documents. I got to give it to Chuck Grassley. That guy does not let up. He is so tenacious in uncovering some of the things, the shenanigans, and really the duplicity that was going on under the last administration. So I think you're going to see a lot of senators focusing on that today.
Senator, those lawmakers include Senators Lindsey Graham, Marsha Blackburn, Ron Johnson, Josh Hawley, Cynthia Loomis, Bill Hagerty, Dan Sullivan, Tommy Tupperville, and Congressman Mike Kelly. And apparently FBI officials told Fox News Digital that Smith and his team, they were tracking the senators, were able to see the phone numbers they called, the location the phone call originated in, and the location where it was received. Why would the FBI feel this is necessary regarding the January 6th investigation, and why target these specific lawmakers?
Well, let me point out that list you just put up there includes members of the Judiciary Committee that will be questioning the FBI today. So, you know, you read the Lindsey Graham, Josh Hawley. I mean, those are just 2 of those that are on the Judiciary Committee that will be questioning Pam Bondi today. I can tell you, as a former Attorney General, as a former federal prosecutor before I was an Attorney General, when you get a grand jury subpoenas that go out, you are saying that the information you're seeking is relating to an ongoing criminal investigation and inquiry. So it is shocking to me that these were sought, and even more shocking that the Hill and those on the Hill that are charged with oversight of these agencies are just being informed that this went out. And thanks to a concerned person, I think a whistleblower that brought this forward.
And really quickly, Senator, because I want to squeeze one in on the government shutdown now entering.
Breaking news tonight. Look at this. FBI Director Patel, Deputy Director Dan Bongino announcing that former special counsel Jack Smith was surveilling the cell phones of several senior Republican senators.
If President Trump had done this, it would be the end of the world. If Trump and Giuliani purchased a dossier that said that Harris or Biden or President Obama or Hillary Clinton were in a Moscow hotel room doing something that, let's say, one of the pundits you heard earlier on was allegedly doing on a Zoom call, maybe. You would hear the indignation forever throughout the universe. But as long as they're doing the spying, as long as they're accusing innocent people of working with Russia, it's nothing to see here. It's totally above board. Which, of course, it isn't. Jack Smith could be the 4th indictment. I think the 4th and 5th indictments. I think John O'Brien, will be indicted very soon, or at least within a couple of months.
apparently part of his investigation into, quote, the events of January 6, 2021, operating under the codename Arctic Frost. Now, FBI agents were able to see who every senator called, where the call was placed from, where the person they were calling was located. Wow. Did they do it with any type of warrant? Here with the full report on this story is justthenews.com founder, editor-in-chief, chief investigative reporter John Solomon. My understanding you might have other breaking news tonight as well.
Yeah, well, let's start with what we know. So the reason that the FBI got these phone records and can conduct this analysis is that Jack Smith got a grand jury subpoena for them, and then the FBI takes them and then analyzes it and sends it back to Jack Smith. Arctic Frost is starting to look like an enemies list investigation. The FBI in 2022 opens up this investigation. This is from the great work of Senator Grassley and Kash Patel getting these records to the American public. They open up and say, let's look at everybody that was contesting the 2020 election as part of a grand conspiracy. The FBI gets that to Jack Smith. Jack Smith goes and gets the grand jury subpoenas. The grand jury subpoenas bring the phone records in, and before you know it, the FBI is starting to snoop at every phone call that 8 senators and 1 House member made, all of them Republicans. It's a really troubling, I think, diagram of how the deep state was working under Joe Biden. The FBI, the DOJ, working hand in glove to pry into the lives, the conversations, and the data of Republicans. Arctic Frost now has an extraordinary toll. I think one of the largest tolls I've ever seen in an investigation. 92 groups, including Charlie Kirk's group. 2 president and a vice president had their phones turned over by Joe Biden to Jack Smith, and now 8 senators and 1 House member. One of the largest dragnets in search of a crime. Doesn't appear they found it, but they were certainly looking.
If you were to do that, see, the way the Democratic Party works is if they couldn't even survive politically with their own emails being released. So the DNC emails showed Bernie Sanders was cheated. It was a calamity. We know now there is no functioning Democratic primary. It's all a facade. Okay, you can ask Biden or Bernie Sanders. Biden actually won his primary. What they did to Biden was worse than what they did to Bernie Sanders. But like the laptop, Hunter's laptop, bribery, graft, they had computer servers in Congress, okay, years back. So they are so, like, if Trump were to surveil all of what they do on a daily basis, almost certainly he'd find numerous crimes in real time. But not so with Trump Republicans. They surveilled, like what? You just heard hundreds of organizations, couldn't find a crime. Couldn't find the crime. Anyway, let's continue.
Looking for a crime on all these different people. It looks like a dragnet, an enemies list. A lot of people I'm talking to in the FBI deeply concerned about it now, but also seem to know about it in 23 and 24, telling me we kind of had a bad feeling this was a bad thing going on.
How soon do you think we'll know whether or not, do you know the jurisdiction, for example, where they had the grand jury?
I don't. I assume it's going to be in D.C. because that's where most of the January 6th investigation was conducted. And, of course, Congress was there. The period of time that Smith and the FBI is looking at is a time when Congress is in session doing work protected by the Constitution. They were certifying the 2020 election. So there's a very serious separation of powers issue here. Why did the executive branch take this thing? What did they tell the grand jurors? What was the predicate? Did they really have any crimes, or were they fishing, and were they intruding on a constitutionally protected event? And I think those are things that we're going to learn more from in the next coming days from Kash Patel. Probably tomorrow with Pam Bondi on Capitol Hill, we may learn a little bit as well.
All right, we appreciate that, John Solomon. JustTheNews.com will also
This
bombshell, a revelation about the Biden-era FBI. Former special counsel Jack Smith was allegedly tracking the private communications and phone calls of 9 Republican senators.
So when is Trump going to do the same thing to Democrats? Imagine if Trump did the same thing to Democrats after all, I don't know, or during, well, he could have done so during the months-long billion-dollar riots in his last year in office. You can say, well, Democrats had no direct, well, Trump didn't tell anyone to commit any crimes either. They tried to pin that on Trump. They tried to pin that, which Republican told anyone to commit crimes? If anything, you had Democrats giving tacit approval to lawbreaking in Trump's life. And I'm not equating what took place, the riots in Trump's last year. Okay, I do believe George Floyd was essentially murdered. But I don't think that billions of dollars in rioting should have been the consequence. And so Democrats stood by, said nothing, in many cases gave tacit approval, or even more than tacit approval. Why didn't Trump start a wide-ranging criminal probe like Jack Smith? So it wasn't a rebellion when federal buildings and arson and all of these things were taking place throughout the country. $1 to $2 billion in property damage, but Trump never surveilled anyone. Yet he was viewed as the despot and authoritarian. And Democrats, of course, are against fascism.
Surveilling senators as part of his probe into January 6th. A declassified document released by Senator Chuck Grassley shows that Jack Smith and his so-called Arctic Frost team were tracking Senators Lindsey Graham, Marsha Blackburn, Ron Johnson, Josh Hawley, Cynthia Loomis, Bill Hagerty, Dan Sullivan, Tommy Tuberville, and Mike Kelly. And they were understanding and following who they were calling, when they were calling them, the times, the content. FBI Director Kash Patel recently finding this September 2023 document called Cast Assistance, which refers to the agency's cellular analysis survey team. Joining me now is Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, thanks so much for being here. You are one of those Republican senators that was being surveilled. You were briefed about this yesterday by the Deputy FBI Director, Dan Bongino. What have you learned? What can you tell us?
Good morning, Maria. Well, in my 10 years of investigating the FBI, dating back to, the exoneration memo of James Comey for Hillary Clinton, the result of all those investigations, this doesn't surprise me. It should shock, it should outrage every American. Quite honestly, by now, it should be obvious to every American that it's not the Republicans that are a threat to our democracy. It's President Obama, it's President Biden, it's the radical leftists that have served and support them. This is outrageous, what has happened. We did not learn much. I appreciate the fact that the director and Dan Bongino notified us of this and briefed us. What we know is that this isn't exactly like the partisans that remain in the Justice Department and the FBI are voluntarily coming forward and confessing their crimes. This just happened to surface when the individual who initially got these records in applying for recertification to this CAST team, listed this as an accomplishment. Apparently proud of the fact that this particular agent subpoenaed 8 members of the Senate and 1 House member. So again, that either shows just a complete lack of knowledge on the part of that particular agent, or such a cavalier attitude inside the agencies that just no big deal of just totally violating the separation of powers here and surveilling members of Congress and busting that separation of powers. I mean, this is, again, it should shock, it should outrage every American. It'll probably shock and outrage about half of us. The other half are, again, just living in the daydream, quite honestly, believing what the Democrats tell them.
But I mean, it's unbelievable how the names that were being surveilled. I mean, you were investigating the FBI, so it's wrong. It's completely unconstitutional and criminal. But you were investigating. I mean, what was Marsha Blackburn doing? What was Lindsey Graham doing? How did they choose which senators to surveil?
That's what we need to find out. Again, it's a very odd group of people that they pulled their phone records on.
Right.
We don't know a predicate. There's no.
This is what makes it criminal. If The only reason that they were surveilled is that they questioned the 2020 election. Well, then that's criminal in nature. These people have a First Amendment right. Even, they're senators, just like anyone else, any other American. They have a First Amendment right to question anything they like. And there was a very interesting time period in modern American political history. Right after Biden, quote unquote, won, and before he was thrown out by Hollywood and George Clooney and Democrats and the morally superior among us, it was an abomination if you ever questioned how somebody who couldn't communicate became the most popular president of all time. I mean, a popular candidate and president at that point, which is completely absurd. Nobody believes that even to this day. Even Democrats don't believe that. They have to say, yes, it happened. And so that was like the sacred cow of Democrats. How could you? You're a denier. On Wikipedia, it's hilarious. The word denier was always coupled with another historical, with history. Okay, denying history. We'll leave it at that. It was never coupled with politics, a political election. Oh, you're a denier of Biden's victory. Well, now the entire Democratic Party, including Hollywood and media, denied Biden's victory right before the 2024 election. They kicked him out of the candidacy. So what did these people do? They weren't under criminal investigation, so why were they surveilled? That's what makes it illegal.
Chain of approval on this thing. Apparently they evaded the normal chain of approval to do something like this by saying that we're not a target or a subject of the investigation. So using a grand jury, they apparently avoided an awful lot of the very rigorous approval that would normally be required if you're going to subpoena a member of Congress that was a target or that was subject to investigation. So again, there are many tricks that these partisans can play to do things I believe are unconstitutional. But we need to get fully to the bottom of this. Senator Grassley and I have already requested all the files, all the records on Arctic frost. This is going to rededicate ourselves to making sure we get it. If some of this information is being held because of the secrecy requirements of grand jury information, we need to have a judge unseal those records. We need to understand exactly what happened, exactly who was involved, and make sure the American public.
I highly
expose this so that the American people really do understand who and what party is the threat to democracy. Here's a hint: it's not Republicans.
And Senator, when you say, they were tracking the communication of the phone calls, what specifically did they get? Did they know who you were calling? What specifically does that mean, tracking the communication and calls as you know it?
So they got access to our phone records from January 4th to January 7th of 2021. They got who was called, the date and time and length of call. So apparently no content. Again, but that's serious enough. I mean, that is snooping on a separate branch of government. It should not have happened, and we need to understand exactly who was involved and exactly how this all happened, how it all got approved, and who all in the end knew about it. It sounds like people pretty high up had to know about this, but again, I can't tell you that right now. I do know that Dan and Cash are going to be looking into this, but again, it's also important to understand this. They have a significant challenge inside the FBI and Department of Justice. These people aren't coming out of the woodwork providing this information. It's like pulling teeth trying to get this information, and it's only through whistleblowers and just this very strange set of circumstances where somebody was trying to recertify for this CAS team that this thing surfaced.
And when you say people high up had to know about it, you mean Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, and Lisa Monaco, the Deputy Attorney General?
Well, it's interesting that Lisa Monaco, a month and a half later, changed the procedure of the Department of Justice in terms of how these kind of records could be obtained. So she must have found out about this, realized that again, I'm speculating here, but it's just the timeline's interesting. President Trump gets in, the Mar-a-Lago raid occurs in August of 2022. He gets indicted in around August of 2023. We get our records pulled in September 2023. In November of 2023, the Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, changed the procedure on how these kind of records can be obtained from a member of Congress. So somebody eventually found out what happened here. But from my standpoint, this is Jack Smith, I think a complete rogue prosecutor, a extreme partisan, but again, appointed by the Biden administration to conduct lawfare against President Trump. Once they had him indicted, once they got target, they went on a fishing expedition to other members of Congress, and I can't really describe what they're looking for.
Unbelievable.
So it's prosecutorial misconduct. Okay? There are probably other examples of law breaking. Hit subscribe to H.A. Goodman. Hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen, and go to H.A. Goodman's other channel, to my super chat. Thank you. There's already been 3 indictments. I think Brennan is going to be next. I explained that today in the live stream earlier today. We'll have a live stream tomorrow, probably around 1 o'clock, 1:30 p.m. But be here. Every single week there will be either an indictment or news about an upcoming indictment. So hit subscribe. I've been telling you this for years and years and years, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you so very much for subscribing and being a member.